Those conversations take place getting and going to a boring chamber meeting, going to a city planning meeting that nobody wants to go to. I show up at the planning office, I got donuts, and I'm like, hey, where's the comprehensive map? And they're looking at me and I'm like, no, really, where's the comprehensive map? They're supposed to have it posted and it's usually tucked away somewhere because nobody wants to see it. Next thing you know, we have conversations. Oh, you're going to rezone all of this agricultural land? What are you guys hoping to do there? And now I'm already working on the back end to figure out what needs to go there.
Welcome to the Dynamist Podcast this week. We are going to talk about something that has been on the tip of lots of investors' tongues, and it's going to approach a lot of things. It's going to provide solutions to help out the community and the local governments. It's also going to be something that's really interesting from an investor standpoint, and that is all things build to rent. And there's a lot of conversation, some good, some controversial, surrounding build to rent. And we're going to dig into all of those things and really pull it apart and figure out how can we do this? How can we do it sustainably? And how can we make sure that everybody benefits from it? Not only the individuals that are going to occupy, but also the owners of these properties and the local governments that are providing this opportunity to help us navigate this. I brought in an expert in the subject, Bethany Finch, and how I met Bethany was she showed up at our Tacoma Pints and Properties meetup, and we just struck up a conversation. I was immediately impressed with her depth of knowledge, her network, and really just her can-do-itness. So I'm just going to give a quick introduction of Bethany, and then I'm going to let her just drive the ship because she's more than capable of doing so. And so Bethany Finch is a remote RV investor. She coined the name, the remote RV investor, meaning she travels around the country just enjoying life in her, I'm sure, a very nice RV. She's a founder of the American-made Home Solutions. Bethany has over 25 years experience of founding and running 4 separate companies, a credit hacking business, an executive rental business, a single-family residential renovation business, and of course, a multifamily syndication business. Her and her husband, Kurt Finch, have worked all the way up from a groundskeeper to owner of multifamily. At one time, Kurt had over 5,000 doors, all under full renovations across 20 different properties under management. Kurt and Bethany are working to utilize their God-given gifts to further Christ's kingdom while utilizing their many properties in many different markets. Bethany has spent many years of her life also teaching both K through 12 students and adults in a variety of subjects such as higher level maths and sciences. She loves to see the light bulb go off for people to be able to see the door open to the opportunities that they never knew were available. Bethany and her husband Kurt currently are traveling around the U.S. with their RV and their security dog. We're going to touch on this at the end of the episode. And of course, I include all this in the show notes, but you can find her on her YouTube channel, her LinkedIn, and of course, her blog, The Diary of a Remote RV Investor. Bethany, welcome. I'm really excited to have you here.
Well, thank you very much, Tim. I'm so happy to be here. Excited to meet you. It was a great introduction.
Yes. Well, of course. And you deserve that introduction because it's not a bunch of fluff and hot air. It's legitimate items that we can point to and show as a undeniable stack of evidence of you are who you say you are and you're doing big and exciting things. And I'm just really glad that we cross paths at the Pints and Properties meetup. If you are somebody listening to a podcast because everybody's telling you, you need to go out, you need to network, you need to rub shoulders, you need to go into a space that you're slightly uncomfortable, and you're just not finding the motivation to do it, please do it. Like, get up off your rear end, put your shoes on, go out the door, because what's the worst you have to lose, right? And you never know what's going to come out of it. And literally just showing up to a meetup that I made up, I met Bethany, and now here she is on the podcast. She's going to come be the keynote at our next meetup next month. And in that room, I saw her interact with a number of different individuals, and they've had their own separate meetings, and you just never know. There could be potential projects that are coming out of it. So you have to get out the door. You have to make yourself a little uncomfortable. You have to go network. You have to expand your network because the relationships are the true currency in getting all of these things done that you want to accomplish and get done. You have to go out and find the opportunity.
Absolutely. And actually, on a side note, had I not done that years ago, I never would have known Brandon Turner before he was Bigger Pocket. I never would have known Leica, who we know in this area, but she was still working at Nordstrom. I've known these people from the beginning of their paths and journeys. So we have a whole different relationship, right? And that was just going up and showing to a brand new startup meetup.
Really? What was the name of that meetup?
Charles Yarber is fixated on real estate meetup.
No kidding. So was James Daynard also at that meetup?
Oh yeah.
Wow. So all the local investor celebrities came from that meetup. That's very interesting.
Yep.
Well, let's dig in. Let's talk about build to rent. And I'm really going to lean on you because I'm going to approach this episode today with a sense of some childlike wonder, which means I don't know a lot about this. I know it's been brought up a lot recently. Affordability is a huge issue. I know that we're having investors that are complaining that it's tough to find a deal that pencils. And there seems to be a lot more momentum around this build to rent movement. And you hear all these things, good things, bad things. And of course, we're going to cover all of that. But I would just love if you put a hand on the wheel and helped us steer this conversation. I'm just going to chime in and ask questions that I may have, because if I have it, I guarantee you other people do too. And I think we're going to probably walk away with a lot of information that's going to be really helpful in actionable items moving forward with this particular subject.
Absolutely. Well, I think a great place to start is, what is build to rent? People immediately conjure something in their mind, but that may not be accurate. So build to rent, the part that most people will recognize build to rent as, is you are building single family homes or townhomes that are all together in a group. And there's amenities. So you might have dog parks and pools, just like you would a multifamily, but they're single family. So you're getting those certificate of occupancies as soon as one house is done. You're not waiting for the whole project to be done to be able to start moving tenants in. So you're building it to scale like you would multifamily, but think of it more like a horizontal multifamily.
And why is there a demand? We hear about a lack of inventory, and we know that there's an affordability crisis. So what problem does this, in particular, these build to rent developments, solve versus going out and just building vertically? Like, why are we targeting neighborhoods instead of apartment complexes?
So that's actually a phenomenal question. The reason we're in crisis is because the government formed it that way. So what people don't understand is urban growth acts. Every single state has one. They map out where the growth is going to go. They're literally directing the populations. We want them to go here, so we need you to build houses here. We need to do this. And then they incentivize those cities or counties to do so. So for instance, in Washington State, part of their Urban Growth Act over 5 years ago, they told Arlington, this teeny tiny farm town up north here, they had to plan on 20,000 units had to be built in their little tiny town, or they were going to lose their federal funding and state funding, which is huge, right? So when you have governments controlling and dictating, they have to find those smaller groups. In down south, they're not called counties, they're called parishes. So you have to find a way to meet that demand, but they've never had to deal with it before. They're not building apartments in these areas. They're not building communities. They're mostly building single family, which is what they know. So most of their code is written to that, all kinds of things. And so when we launched in COVID, why? Because in COVID, the only projects that got done were custom homes and certain commercial real estate, not multifamily housing, but certain commercial like office and things like that. Those are the only things that got pushed through during COVID. So that housing crisis just got even bigger. And now, even now, if you look, we're still trying to recover from that. But they look at the total number of projects that are approved. It's like over 6 million short in the inventory. And they looked at that and said, oh, well, the number of projects across the country that have been approved is actually only like 2 million. It's a ridiculous, huge span. And so, of course, they're telling all these cities and local governments, you got to build more, you got to build more, you got to build more. But again, how long does it take to build a multifamily, big, huge apartment community versus single family houses? I can get a single family housing community up a whole lot quicker and faster and work with these smaller governments that need me to work with them because they don't know. They need someone to help hold their hand, so to speak, and get them through it to get the housing they need, but also do it in a way that's efficient, right? So if we can put some townhomes in there, we can make it a PUD, we can create some amenities. Now suddenly we're looking very attractive to them, much more so than a multifamily project.
So I want to talk a little bit about the demand. And demand has a lot to do with everything. It has a lot to do with affordability, access, the economy, right? Think about when the construction market is healthy and booming, we're within the affordability bounds. Everybody's working. We have carpet companies working. We have roofers working, framers working, drywallers working. We have local people that are employed. And what are they employed doing? We're building up the infrastructure of a society, because when you have a housing development, what also comes? We have grocery stores and schools and restaurants and coffee shops, and it boosts the economy. And when people stop transacting, it really has a detriment on the economy. And so the affordability crisis isn't just impacting people's abilities to purchase a home. It really has a trickle-down effect onto the overall economy, because these builders, they're just business owners, they're entrepreneurs. And so if the cost of goods rises exponentially, well, they cannot continue to do business for free or at a deficit. So they're either going to shut their business down or figure out a way to become profitable. And how they become profitable is they increase the cost of goods and they cut employees. And when they cut employees, now you have an unemployed workforce and a commodity, this house or home or whatever, that's more expensive. And there's a couple ways to solve the affordability crisis. One of them is just simply make more of whatever there is a deficit of. We can manipulate really two things: the cost of money, or we can put more supply into the system, and the more supply, it makes everything balance out. Prices come down. Now, I know that the deficit is huge, and I track macro data all the time. So every day I'm looking at permits, starts, household formation. One of the reasons that's contributing to the affordability crisis right now is a lack of supply and a high demand. It's basic high school economics. And the last metric I looked at, and of course these numbers change all the time, but off the top of my head, we have 2.3, 2.5 million new household formations right now. And standing inventory on the market nationwide, standing single family home inventory is around a little under 400,000. Okay. So that is a massive problem, which means whatever's available, people are going to fight and compete over to purchase. And the only thing that's really keeping that at bay right now is that the cost of money is so high. But as soon as those rates come down and we have no supply, everybody rushes into the market. We create another imbalance. Prices are artificially inflating. And so we have to solve this by producing more supply. And I saw an estimate, and I'm bogarting here, so I'm going to pass it back to you. But I saw an estimate that if builders were like full production, building as fast as they could build, they couldn't even meet the demand if they were like round the clock crews for the next 10 to 20 years, something like that, some insane statistic. So we need inventory. And the inventory that builders are building are like the move up luxury homes. They're not building the entry level home, which is a huge problem, because we have Americans, new household formations, that need the starter home, but nobody's interested in building the starter home. They want the luxury.
Right. Exactly. Or we have an aging society that needs to step down to what would be considered a starter home for many, right? And we don't have any of those left. So that's what we've seen happen all across this country. We focus on secondary and tertiary markets for that reason, because again, we want to be where the progress is going. But when you look at that demand, that college graduate who just got married and who's going to be stuck in an apartment for how long until they can save up enough to get into a house? Well, if there's no starter homes available whatsoever, they're going to be saving a very long time. Or you're going to see what we're seeing now, how many of them are living back home to save up to get into a house.
So you, as the entrepreneur, you're taking on some risk, because right now, cost of supply, building, it's expensive, and there's a lot of unknowns. What is the cost of debt going to be in the future? This is where I'm going to get on my soapbox for just a minute here. I think when you hear about real estate investors coming in and building a build-to-rent community, the first thing that comes to mind is like, okay, we have these major institutions that are coming in and removing the opportunity from everyday Americans to be able to purchase and own their individual home. Do we want these institutions owning entire neighborhoods? But I think something that's also overlooked is the amount of risk that you as a builder, as an entrepreneur, as a fundraiser are taking, because there's so many unknowns, right? There's government regulation, the cost of money. And what you're really doing is putting yourself out on a limb, taking a risk, and building a structure that people can then safely reside inside of risk-free. You're the one carrying that risk. If there's a default, if you don't finish on time, if the cost of goods and supplies to build increases, you're the one carrying that cost. And so I think when we're having this conversation, we really need to be open-minded about the pros and cons of the community net benefit, because a lot of individuals, myself included, I'm individually not going to go out and take the risk right now as a developer because the cost of money is too high. And so I think that needs consideration. You made a comment that it's faster to build these types of communities than it is to build a multifamily. Why? Why is that?
Because residential regulation is far different than commercial residential. So you have a whole lot more inspectors available. You have a whole lot more appraisers available. You have the numbers that are available to you on the residential side are, it's like two to three to every one on the commercial side. And the committees and the processes that all these local governments have set up to do anything on the commercial side, on a residential side, you building your single family home can walk in and almost get it done over the counter within a day, for the most part. It's not much different for me when I'm building a whole community. There's only a few different slight changes. And so streamline, it's much more efficient there. But keep in mind, now you mentioned this about the risk. Now keep in mind, every one of our GP team, we each have 25 plus years of experience. So there's a reason we launched in COVID when nobody else did, right? We've been in business long enough to know that's the time that you strike the iron, because now we're way ahead of the curve, right? We're finishing projects that they're just getting started on in the BuildtoRent community. And so we did mitigate a lot of those risks, right? We bought rate caps, right? We intentionally paid the money nobody else was willing to, right? We factored in, okay, we don't know what's happening with COVID. This is Crazyville, but this is what we've seen in the past, right? Because we had that experience to draw from. The other thing too is you're filtering it through how expensive it is to build here in this market, which in this case, the Seattle, Tacoma area, that market. It is a whole different beast in some of the other markets I'm in. I'm down in Louisiana, I'm in Alabama, I'm in Florida, I'm in Tennessee, I'm in all these other markets that the cost of goods is less and labor is less. The majority of it up in the north end is labor. It's not as much, the costs are almost comparative, but it is less expensive there. So when I can factor those things in, I'm going to cherry pick where I'm working at, right? I don't want to go jump into the most expensive pond, take the most expensive risk, and for what gain? Not, right? I can do the same thing, streamline it. And now as we get things more vertically integrated as a company, now we're getting more and more of those efficiencies in. We're bringing those costs down even further. So then when it's ready to go into those other markets, like the Seattle market, right? I'm going to make sure that I've streamlined everything that I possibly can to, again, mitigate that risk. But the same thing, I'm not building 4 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms, 6 bedrooms, right? These are 1,100, 1,200 square foot homes, 3 beds, 2 baths. You know, they're shotgun styles. They're not 2 stories. They're not full basements. They're starter homes. And in some of them, because each one of them, we do things a little bit differently based on whatever that community needs. Some of them we individually plotted so that if push came to shove, we needed capital, we're selling a couple of them off. Now, who are we going to sell them to? The people already living in there. Now we're owner financing. Now we're creating another win for that community because they already love our place. They already want to stay there. They don't want to move. And now they have the opportunity to buy it, even when the bank says, I'm sorry, you need 13% interest rate. We're not going to charge those kinds of numbers.
That's interesting. So that is in the business model then, if you did need to capitalize, you have a strategic exit plan in place to seller finance if it works to the existing occupants. You're giving them the opportunity of homeownership. Are you ever building with that in mind on the forefront? Like, are you constructing with a lease option or rent to own on the forefront? Or is the majority, you want to hold these long-term, these are long-term buy and holds. And if you have to free up some capital, you could sell 1 or 2 individually, which, by the way, what an incredible built-in exit strategy. You can't just like sell 1 apartment in a multifamily building. You can't be like, whoa, crap, we need 200 grand here. So let's sell 3 units and we'll be good.
Right, exactly. It depends on how our each of our communities is laid out. Some of them, if they're full-blown PUDs, they're all one that we're not going to be able to break those up, right? But others, we've got them in 2 or 3 different sections and phases. Others like that one, we've got them all individually for that reason. So each one of them is really catered to that community and what that community needs. So some of the communities that we're working with, we go back and forth with those local governments on incentives. We're helping you, you help us. Let's scratch each other's back. Let's talk through this. So if they are in desperate need for housing, it could be a scenario where realistically, if that property we at the end decided we were going to sell it, instead we chose to not sell it to a hedge fund group or something like that, but we instead made an agreement with the city that as long as you don't charge us taxes for, say, 10 years, then we'll owner finance them and sell them off to the tenants, and we'll keep them in your communities, right? And now, that city's looking a lot better about whether or not they want us to stay on board. It really just depends on what those needs are. We have so much more flexibility.
How do you even have that conversation with the city? Like that right there, that strategy of, hey, if you defer taxes for 10 years, we promise you not to sell to a hedge fund. I didn't even know you could do things like that. How do you even find out this information?
Oh, yes. These conversations started years and years ago. Again, we're not in urban markets. So we're already in these secondary and tertiary markets, right? So a lot of these, I was a school teacher. They're kids of the councilmen and the building planners. And I was 14. One of my earlier jobs was working in a planning department. So I already knew how that process all worked. So their kids were already in my classes. I was already their coach. I already had a lot of these connections. So when I started seeing problems in certain areas and some of my kids complaining, and I'm like, well, that sounds like a house we need to buy. And they're like, what? And so then we start having a conversation. And the next thing you know, we find all the bad sheep of those neighborhoods. We renovate those. Then we owner finance them to somebody else. And now we're providing a solution. I'm at their kid's soccer game or whatever. And the dad's talking to me, hey, I really like what you did. Would you guys ever consider doing something else? And I'm like, well, it depends. It's got to be worth my time and effort, right? So each conversation, the Lord really just shifted and navigated to meet the needs of the communities. And that's the difference, because we're trying to create sustainable growth. We don't want to go into a community, build a building and get out. That's not our goal. That's not our plan. So our plan isn't we're going to sell every single one of these. Some of them we are keeping for sure. But God's shown us those markets we're going to be in a long time, and we're going to continue building out to those next growth markets outside of them. Others, he's like, no, we're good. We can do this and we can do this and move it along, right? So those conversations take place getting and going to a boring chamber meeting, going to a city planning meeting that nobody wants to go to, just me being, I don't know what the word would be, nosy is probably what they would consider me, but I show up at the planning office, I got donuts, and I'm like, hey, where's the comprehensive map? And they're looking at me and I'm like, no, really, where's the comprehensive map? They're supposed to have it posted and this and that. And it's usually tucked away somewhere because nobody wants to see it. And next thing we have conversations and, oh, you're going to rezone all of this agricultural land? What are you guys hoping to do there? And now I'm already working on the back end to figure out what needs to go there, right?
That is absolutely genius. So before you even get into those offices, how are you identifying these markets from a 10,000 foot level view before you dig in on a deeper level?
Well, the biggest part is population growth and lack of infrastructure. So if you look, where are all the people moving, right? You break it down, people may use the U-Haul maps. Where are they all going? Well, they're all going to Huntsville, or they're all going to Austin, or they're all going, again, I don't want to be in Huntsville. I want to be outside of Austin. I want to be outside of these markets. So if they can't afford that market, where are they going to move to? Then I'm pulling up that county or that state urban growth act. I'm looking at their map going, oh, they're planning on this. I knew that they were building a third ring at Houston years ago. I knew that was already in the works. So I already knew which communities I needed to be in before so that we could have the growth prior to.
I would assume when you're building an entire development, you probably get a break on cost of material. So your cost margin is down, your basis is down because you're building in bulk. You're not building an individual home. So the next question that my brain has is, well, if you're holding these properties on a multifamily, you have like one main sewer line. You have a bunch of individual toilets and bathrooms, but you have like one main sewer. In this development, there's many. And so I'm curious, is the maintenance cost exponentially increased in a development, or is it pretty stable building single families instead of multi-story multifamilies?
Well, what people don't realize is When you build that multifamily community, you're thinking that you have one main connection into the sewer line. You don't. Usually you have multiple. They just don't realize it. If it's usually a multifamily, if it's a, say, 200 unit property, you might have sometimes 10 to 15 buildings to equal that. And so they'll have 3 or 4 taps into that main sewer line that you're going to be utilizing. So it's just a matter of what size pipe down to what size pipe down to what size pipe, right? Some of our markets that we're in, we're actually building our own sewer treatment plant because the local government couldn't handle that many new homes in their area. So we build the local septic sewer treatment plant, and then it goes back into their system. Now their system can handle it. And then we have a 3-year plan where we built it, we maintain it, and then everything's good and proven. And then we basically hand it back over to the city.
Do they purchase that from you, or are you like giving that to the city? Okay, so that's a cost up front.
Cost to us, but remember, I'm reminding them, oh, if that's what it's going to take, I'm pretty sure this needs to be only 5 foot versus 200 foot.
Right. Yeah, and there's some horse trading going on. It's just insane how political development is, but it's interesting. It's fun in a sense because you can really make something out of nothing. You just have to figure out what the pain point is and how to solve that problem. It's very interesting. So I'm sure you have a sweet spot. I'm sure you've like done some numbers and said, we won't build less than X amount. We don't like to build more than this amount. We like to be this close to a grocery store or a school. I mean, what are the loose parameters that you're looking for?
Well, loose parameters, we always want to be within no more than 30 minutes to a hospital. So it can't be so far out that there's no medical services. And it has to be a hospital. It can't just be a walk-in clinic, right? Oftentimes we're looking to be no more than 45 minutes from major employers. So that could be military bases, that could be manufacturing, that could be any number of things. Believe it or not, the funniest thing that we laugh and joke about is there a Walmart, Home Depot, or Starbucks? If there's any of those 3 franchises, they spend so much money in their research and development to know where they're placing them. We know that they anticipate a certain number of growth. We're safe.
Let's talk about size of these developments. How many homes are you guys doing at a time when you put in a new development, build-to-rent development?
Our smallest was supposed to be 100. The city, because the sewer treatment plant, it got dropped down to 98. And so far, our largest is 241.
Okay. So we don't want any less than 100 homes-ish, 98, 100 homes. Okay. Interesting. And then you said you typically want to hold these long-term, but sometimes you build a build-to-rent development and you realize, okay, we don't want to be here long-term. And so at that point, then are you selling the entire community to an outside investor and then moving on to the next market?
It depends, right? And I know that's a completely government answer, but it really does depend because what we have is, again, what are we trying to do? We are trying to literally help other investors who don't want to take the risk, who don't want to do anything that we're doing, but want the great returns, want to make an impact on people's lives, and be a part of making America great by building it back up. So to do that, they come alongside us, and when they invest with us, at the end of a sale, well, now they've got all this capital, they're going to have to redeploy somewhere. So sometimes we're simply going to refinance the properties, get all the capital returned, and then keep cash flowing, right? Keep getting those depreciations and all that. Other times when we sell, we may sell it to a big hedge fund group and that, which they've been catering to us for over a year now, right? And originally it was, well, when you're 70% done, you can sell it to us. Now it's all the way down to 50% because they've had money sitting there too long, right? But in the same token, that's not necessarily our goal, because our goal isn't just to turn around. We want to create profit. We have to create profit, not just for our businesses, but for our investors. The whole point is if we can't create profit and we can't help create that legacy growth for you, we're not creating that sustainable growth that we're trying to do within the country. So to do that, we have to create profit. So when we create that profit, is it going to be from a sale or a refi? Because we've created so much equity. So we're always looking at those numbers, right? If the feds keep adjusting this and doing that, right? Because if we know right now, when they just jacked up all those rates, well, now those multifamily properties last year that were selling at top dollar, that just changed, right? Nobody's buying it at that price. Even though that cap rate might still be a 6 in that market, they can't afford to because the rates that they're now buying it at, is just ridiculous.
That's a great question here. How are you evaluating when you have a development of 100 homes? Are you assigning it? I guess you would. You would assign it a cap rate, not a comp, because you're selling it as a package, right? And the performance is based off of current market rents. And so I'm sure there's a whole background of a whole team in the background that's estimating median income and what can they afford as far as maximum rent affordability. And yeah, is this market going to work or is it not going to work? Do you have an in-house management company that's managing all of these communities?
Yes and no. So we're vertically integrating that. So we're building it out. So we're trial and error the different groups on our first several projects to determine, okay, can we build off of you, or are we scrapping it all and designing our own? My background is property management, asset management, right? That's my background. That's my wheelhouse. So they don't like it when Bethany's showing up usually. Why? Because I'm the most prudent, right? I'm the one that's looking at every little thing and sees more than the others. But when I do, we streamline, we become more efficient because I'm thinking of the big picture. I'm looking at, no, we're going to be duplicating this and we need to duplicate it much faster than little mom and pop. So we start with a local one. Because again, we're trying to create sustainable growth. So we start with a local one, see if they can handle the growth, if they're willing to learn and work with us. And if we can work together and build that out. If not, we move them along. We bring someone else in that can. And because again, ultimately, we need to build that out, whether we do it vertically or whether we do it with another group.
We have a home, we have a rental property, and it's in this, what I call a vinyl village, modern home. You can tell the legacy construction style is dwindling away, and we have modern construction, and every house looks exactly the same. And I'm kind of envisioning something similar for a build to rent. It just makes sense. They're good quality homes. You know what I'm talking about, where the neighborhoods are uniform. Anyways, long story short is it turned into what I would call the most affordable market in our area. It's the lowest price point that people could move in, purchase a home. We have a lot of renters. And what it brought was a lot of crime in the neighborhood. And a couple weeks ago at 2 a.m. at the community park, that was this beautiful park that they built for these little kids in this community, there was a guy who at 2 a.m., for whatever reason, got into an argument at a party and was shot and killed. And so, tragic story. And you know, the concern is like everybody in the neighborhood's reaching out to the builder, and everybody's trying to solve this problem. Do we put lights on? Do we hire armed security? And I'm curious because build to rent could go a lot of ways. Now, you're not like super urban, but what types of things are you guys thinking about for impact on the community?
Most all of our communities are gated communities, a little bit more control there, right? Because we have amenities, we have dog parks and walking trails and things. We do have better lighting than the average place. We are thinking like a multifamily, and operating with, on-site management. So a lot of that gets reduced when, like what you're thinking of is this housing development, like the property manager's not living there. They're not seeing everybody and realizing who the problem child is and all of that. It's only just whatever they hear.
No, that's a good point. And that's huge, that on-site property manager. So I guess my last question, and probably the one I should have left way more time for, is how are you funding these up front? I'd love to know what kind of loans you're getting. How are you raising capital? At what point are you converting these into like a long-term product? What does that process look like? What's the financials on this?
Typically, we raise early capital and we incentivize and reward those that come in the earliest with us. That's when we're getting our projects entitled and going through engineering and all of that. Then once it's entitled, now we've reduced all that risk. So now we're raising equity to go into a bank loan where we're going to be building out our horizontal and our vertical. Now, horizontal is all your infrastructure, your plumbing, your sewage, your electrical, all that. And some of our local credit unions and banks that we already have relationships with can go and just do the horizontal. Some can do bigger, but those are more of our national contracts. So those ones that are our national, they're doing horizontal and vertical. Vertical means when we actually put the foundations in and we start going sticks in the air. So at that point, when we raised early equity, and then now we're going into that bank loan, right? We're raising a little bit more equity, getting a bank loan for 65% of it usually a construction loan of some kind. We did have bridge on one of our projects, but again, we bought a cap rate. So we knew what things were going to be happening. And we also knew where we were going to be at. So in that particular one, we knew we're moving into a bank loan. And so some of our bank loans, there's several different products. So some of them, it's interest only for the first 5 years, 7 years, and that's getting us through the construction. And then we've created so much more. Then we're doing a refi into either a long-term product because we're going to be keeping it, pulling out all that equity, or we're selling it.
So banks will look at the entire development as one thing and give you, I guess, a portfolio loan of some type for the entire development instead of individual assets?
Yes, exactly. So for instance, what you'll typically see, if you think of a construction loan in two phases, when you think of a single family house that you go get a hard money loan on, right? They set back their construction amount. And then as you turn in receipts, they give you the money back. So that's pretty much what it looks like early on. And then if this was a smaller bank and they needed to phase out the first loan to go into the vertical loan, then at that point, they just added everything together and, okay, this is where we're at. Okay, now we're going to redo it. Now the equity is this much more. And then they're creating that third loan or second loan, depending on. So each one of them has been different because, again, the market's been changing.
And the capital that you raise, obviously, earlier capital is more incentivized. Do those become passive equity owners, or are you just debt partners with them and they're cashed out once you put a long-term product on the development?
So we have both options available. So we actually have a debt option available and we have an equity option. So those people that want what we call grandma and grandpa money, right? They want secured by real estate. They want this. They want a pref return. They want a good build out on the end. They want that 5 years. They're going to get cashed out. They're good to go. We have those. We also have debt options where it's a 24-month note, 14% APR, 2 years, and then quarterly payouts.
So there's a lot happening here. There's a lot. How many people at the leadership level are driving this ship? How many people would you consider your peers and teammates picking new markets, securing debt, running the construction? How many people does it take to pull something like this off?
A lot, literally. So there's 4 of us main GPs, but then we've got a bunch of other people working behind the scenes, right? Our main developer, it's not just him, right? He's got a partner and then he's got all the contractors he has to hire. One of ours, obviously our developer, his is straight development, right? He focuses on just the development piece, the permits, anything to do with that. Obviously, he has to be in on the finance meetings, right? Because at the end of the day, we got to always communicate that. We have another one who's strictly the finance, right? He's the one going after getting the loans and doing all the docs. And all of us have to be capital raisers, right? At the end of the day, all of us are capital raisers. My particular role is all the investor relations, asset management, community, because we work with 501c3s and we're actively in the communities and cities. I'm the heartbeat of all of that and connecting people with these opportunities and things. And then our other folks are really just kind of shoring up all of the balance sheet. Are we staying on task? Are we, they're looking at all the finance side of things, looking at the major picture. Okay, we need to sell now. We need to keep this. We need to do this, or something's happening, red alarm, things like that.
My last question, it's going to be very selfish in nature, so I apologize. I'm a guy who, this is like what I have my eyes set on in the horizon. What you're doing, how you've teamed up, how everybody's handling an active management role, you and the other 3 GPs, co-GPs, that's what I want to do. And I have a lot of skill sets, but as far as like the guy who's the developer, not my skill set. Can I go flip? Yes, I can. But I would much rather partner and bring this vision to the masses. And so for a guy like me, I host these meetups, I have a podcast, I'm constantly out in the community making new connections. What is something that I could take away as an actionable step? And anybody listening to this podcast who maybe has aspirations to do what you're doing, what's something that I can put on my vision board and make progress towards to graduate into what you're doing? I would love to take what I'm doing, grow it, and then translate it into a partnership at some point with my audience or whoever, and be able to raise capital to do these projects that are benefiting the community. Like, that's what I want to do. How do I do that?
I think the biggest thing to remember is we all start somewhere, right? I've been the person out pushing the contractors and making things happen and getting dirty and crawling in the pits and doing all that, just as I have been the person in the boardrooms meeting with 10 attorneys and trying to get everybody to agree and sign on the dotted line. And everybody starts somewhere. So you have to look at your skill set, just like you identified. I don't want to be the developer. I don't want to do this. I see this as my lane, right? And you can see where you could bring value. So that's huge. Guess what? My developer, that's exactly why we partnered. He's like, Bethany, you and I have the same vision, but I don't want to do what you do. And you definitely don't want to do what I do. So let's partner up, right? And get this done. So when we look at our individual skill sets, how can we bring value to that team? And who's willing to let me be a part of that team until I get more and more experience and my value gets exponentially more, right? And so there's a lot of room in the space for anybody who's got grit and willing to do the work that nobody else is willing to do, because at the end of the day, everybody feels entitled and they think they deserve everything. And the reality is, he who does the most work is the one who deserves it.
Yeah, you hit on some absolutely key points. And I think I just need to follow you around and arm wrestle you until you just submit to being my mentor. And I just get to hold on to your pocket and see what you do and just try to be useful.
That's what's so awesome about what we've done and what we've accomplished. We have always been an open book. Anybody that's a part of our teams, whether they're an agent, whether they're a contractor, whether they're a lender, it doesn't matter where they are. If they want to learn something, we're an open book and we let them. But they've got to bring value to the team, right? We're not just opening the books up to anybody. So a lot of people in the area, believe it or not, who wanted to be real estate investors came alongside us. They were an investor in one of our deals. We opened the books, they learned, and some of them said, Bethany, I don't want to do this. I'm just going to keep lending. How much more do you need? Let's just keep going. Others said, I can do that. And then they'd step up and then they'd do a rehab with us. And then they'd step up and then they learned each step of the way along there, the things they wanted to learn. Why? Because they came alongside and said, hey, I've got some capital. Let's do a flip together. Where you're running the flip, I'm learning, right? And everyone is different, but there's opportunity in every space. And so that's why I always tell people, if you want to get in the syndication space, you need to be an LP in a deal. You need to be an LP in somebody's deal that you like how they operate things. You like what they're doing, whatever it is, be an LP in that deal. See what it's like to sit on that side of the table, because you're the one that's going to have to answer to them on the other side.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. In the Army, I used to be in the Army, and, the best leaders were ones that served in every role leading up to that positions, because they could understand the purposeful placement of each of those roles individually because they knew them inside and out. And the best leaders knew the capability of each of the team and what the expectations were. And so, excellent point. Bethany, we unfortunately have to wrap this up. I definitely want to pick your brain about credit, but I'm going to catch you at the Bellevue Reaps meetup. I think that's next month, so I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to put all of your information in the show notes below. I see you active on LinkedIn all the time. You are constantly on LinkedIn, and we're going to put that link in the show notes below. We're going to put your YouTube channel and, of course, your blog as well. Is there anywhere else that people could get a hold of you or reach out to you?
Those are the best ways they're going to get in touch with us and get some good value, see who we are, see what we do. We know that we're not everybody's kettle of fish, right? Not everybody wants to learn from somebody like me. So my coaching program isn't necessarily a good fit for some folks, right? And we get that, and that's okay. We want to work with folks that it makes sense for us to work with them and that they're a good fit for us just the same.
Well, awesome. If you're listening, please scroll down and look at Bethany's information, get in touch with her, reach out. I know she loves people asking questions, and she's just the nicest individual you've ever met in person. She's very personable and warm. So please reach out. And if you are listening to the show and this was inspiring to you, you learned something, do me a favor, pay the tax. Please like the show, subscribe, bring a friend in, tell them to listen to the show, send it to their friends, give us a good review. It just helps us be seen to more people. And we're just trying to give this information to as many people as possible because we want to grow the kingdom. We want us all to elevate and ascend together. As they say, a rising tide lifts all ships, and that is our goal. We want all of us to be autonomous and strong individuals that are leaving a legacy to our children to follow. So thank you guys for listening. This has been a blast. Bethany, I will see you this weekend, actually, on Saturday. When this episode gets released, the Multifamily Summit will be over, but I will see you this Saturday at the Multifamily Summit in Tacoma, and we will catch you all on the flip side. Thanks for listening, guys.